used as an ADA space for many years. When COVID hit, the council authorized restaurants to have parklets in the street. So the restaurant at that time requested a parklet and was permitted to have a parklet, which took the space of that ADA space. So what staff did, we created two different ADA parking spaces. One was meant to be temporary on the northbound Dolores, just south of Fifth Avenue. So it was essentially right around the corner from where it used to be. And we installed a permanent ADA space in the parking lot directly across the street from the post office main doors. And we did receive a lot of complaints at that time for moving the parking space on Dolores. I'm sorry, on Fifth. So we said, this is COVID, this is temporary. Let's see how, let's see if we can make this work. When I believe, Brandon, help me, I believe that restaurant was sold and the parklet went away. Maybe Rob knows exactly when that occurred, but
I don't know about being sold, but definitely the parklet went away. They weren't using it, so
okay.
Yeah.
All right, the parklet went away. So what we did is we recreated that old ADA parking space on eastbound Fifth, just east of Dolores. That's the situation today. We kept the permanent ADA parking space in the parking lot across the street. And ever since we restored that ADA space on Fifth, we haven't received any complaints. So we think the issue has been resolved. If anything, there's a second ADA space in that location as opposed to the one that was there historically. And that's the history of it. At this point, we recommend to leave it be. I think we're okay. And but it was good, an old business item to kind of review what was done and to make sure that we have a good solution going forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
thanks, Bob. That was a good recap. Chief, if I could, I just want to mention that I did turn on the recording of the meeting, so we have a record of it. We didn't miss anything in the recording. We just did introductions. It was open for public comment and anything not on the agenda. Nobody spoke, and Bob was just starting on the first old business item.
Thank you for the recap, Brandon, and appreciate that. Is there any public comment regarding old business?
Chief, I don't see anyone's hands raised for public comment.
Okay. Thank you, Yvette. We'll move on to the first item of new business, and item number A on new business is a staff briefing to the public on our plan to provide public input opportunities regarding establishing paid parking for downtown and Del Mar Beach parking areas in support of City Council's priorities. With that item, I'd like to read into the record. We received an email from someone who is unable to attend the meeting, an email from Mr. Joe Tarantino. He describes that he strongly objects to paid parking in Carmel. It didn't work the first time and it won't work now. Just for the record, his comment. With that, I'd like to offer the opportunity for the public to provide any input regarding this item. And to start off with, I'd like to rephrase this a little bit. This is a staff briefing about public input opportunities that will be occurring in the future. So with that, I'd like to offer the public an opportunity to talk about the public input opportunities.
Mr. Chairman, just kind of a point of order, perhaps it would be more appropriate for, I would imagine, Brandon to talk about what the plan is before we open up the public comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's do that. If you have your hand raised now, we'll pause a minute and let Mr. Swanson proceed with the presentation on the plan for public input opportunities regarding planning.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, so as you pointed out, the staff has been directed by City Council that one of our strategic priorities in the coming months is to continue to explore a paid parking program. Towards the end of last year and into the, I guess, middle and end of last year, calendar year, myself and Chief Tomasi spent some time talking to various paid parking consultants. We did sort of narrow down the field what we think a program could look like in both the commercial district and the down at the Del Mar lot, and how that might also interact with some sort of residential program, talking about contractor parking and things like that. So the next step for us in the process is I feel like we have our partner pretty much nailed down for the paid parking. The next step is really to craft a more refined program, what it would look like, and then start doing some public outreach meetings. I anticipate those happening here in the next couple of months. I guess if there's a delay or a pause in it, the reason for that is we've been working with the City Council to help refine that list. It's about 30 projects or so, list of priorities for city staff. This includes Public Works, the Police Department, Community Planning and Building, because all three of our departments will play a role in this at some point. So we are on pause a little bit right now, waiting for that final direction from City Council to tell us where the paid parking fits in our list of priorities. There's other projects on their ordinances, things like that we need to get some direction on. But we have continued conversations with our consultants to kind of refine the program. But once we get the go ahead from City Council, then we're going to start doing our community programs, and there'll be a lot of advertising, a lot of outreach to make sure people have an opportunity to participate in that.
Thank you, Brandon. So at this time, we'd like to open it up for the public if there's any comments regarding how we present or get public opportunity or public input moving forward on parking.
So it looks like Lance Fong has raised his hand. If you want to go ahead and make your public comment, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes or under.
You're muted, Lance.
There we go. Hello, nice to meet the committee. Thank you for including the public. I'm actually here for another subject, but while this one came up, I thought I would just sort of add my 2 cents. I look forward to following and learning how you'll reach out to the community regarding paid parking. In principle, my husband and I, who are homeowners on the corner of Santa Rita and Ocean, are supportive of paid parking if it does allow the city to increase income to help other services. At the same token, there's a caveat there. We understand some cities like this will have paid parking and residents will have some sort of pass so that they don't have to pay, because otherwise I think you're going to get extreme pushback for residents who have to drive downtown for a quick errand or to eat at their favorite restaurant. And the other concern we have is, which is contingent upon our agenda item coming forward, is parking on the adjacent streets. So there is a huge issue with Santa Rita, which I won't go into in this moment, but I think people need to take into concern, if you do paid parking, then out-of-town visitors will be looking for free parking. So there needs to be some sort of awareness of that parking offset. Because there's a parking garage down there, people don't like to park there because they don't want to pay. And so I think people are very money conscious these days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public would like to comment on this item?
Chief, I don't see anyone else has hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much, Yvette. With that, we'll move right on to the next item on the agenda is a citizen request regarding speeding on San Carlos and a proposed reduction of speed. Pardon me, I'm sorry about that. a reduction in speed from 25 to 15 miles per hour. On this particular item, we have conducted a speed analysis in that area, and I'll turn it over to Rob Culver to talk briefly about that.
Before we turn it over to Rob, Chief, I would just like to point out that we're talking about San Carlos between Alta and Vista.
Thank you.
Alta and Vista, not anything, not elsewhere.
Thank you so much.
Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yeah, we had a speed analysis done for 1 week in October after receiving complaints of speeding. And you can see this, the speed limit is 25. The average speed was 12 and the fastest speed was 27. So it's a very low enforcement rating on that block.
Thanks, Rob. And it looks like we got a pretty good sample, 1,250 vehicles over that period of time.
Yes.
Chief, I believe that there was no accident data in the past couple of years on that location.
I'm not familiar with any accident data on that particular street. I did some accident data research on another item on the agenda. Sorry, I don't have accident data on that street, but I know that staff have been working on this issue for quite some time and have deployed the speed data analysis module out there. I'm confident that we would have heard about accidents happening in that section had that been the case.
Right. I know of no accident. And Rob, have you heard of any accidents that you have to clean up out there?
No, not.
Okay, so let's assume that there's been no accidents there for the past several years. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we keep the speed limit 25 miles an hour, which it is now, and deny the request to reduce the speed to 15 miles an hour. But maybe we should hear from the public before we make any motions.
Yeah,
Bob,
I think
you were,
that would be good. I mean, I'll wait till we hear from the public. I have some thoughts on this when we get to the motion, but yeah, it'd be a good idea to open up to the public first.
Yep.
So to begin public comment, I'd like to read into the record a written response that we received from Joe Tarantino. He comments that I've lived here for over 50 years and have rarely seen anyone speed on San Carlos Street. Reducing the speed limit is unnecessary unless police data contradicts my comment. So that's the email that we received on this particular item. With that, let's turn it over to the public for any comment. Hello, for the phone number ending in 898, do you have comment?
No.
I was just picking up some audio. I wanted to be sure. Yvette, do you show anyone raising hand or expressing an interest in commenting on this particular item?
I don't show any hands raised at this time.
Thank you. So Brandon, I think you wanted to make a couple of comments or express some ideas regarding this particular item.
Yeah, so you're closing public comment. Yeah, I think I mean, Bob's already kind of like tipped his hand on his motion. So I think I would agree with that, but I would say, you know, since this was brought up as a concern, maybe we could put on the schedule to check it again in 6 months or something, to do another speed survey, just to kind of keep an eye on it. And then if something, you make that, if you're comfortable making that part of your motion, Bob, I would second that.
That would be fine to make the motion to keep the speed at 25 miles an hour for the time being, and do another speed survey, a similar speed survey in approximately 6 months. And bring it back to the Traffic Safety Committee at a subsequent meeting.
Great, as an old business item, that's a good idea. Okay,
So you second that motion?
I'll second that if that's your motion, yeah.
So the motion's been made and seconded. It's to keep the speed at 25 miles an hour, provide a 6-month review, and then bring it back on old business with the update at the time that after we conduct the second speed analysis. I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Moving on to new business item C. This is a citizen request to consider establishing a resident-only parking zone on Santa Rita between Ocean and Mountain View. And with that, I'd open it up to, well, let's, I guess, review the item with staff to begin with. Yesterday morning, myself and the other committee members drove through that particular area and looked at some of the concerns that have been expressed by citizens in the area. And we definitely agree that there are certain segments of that roadway that are narrow and that can certainly pose some special issues, especially exacerbated when there's overflow parking in the area of Forest Theater. In assessing that particular issue and that particular street, we also had discussed briefly the concerns as it related to narrow streets elsewhere in the city. And there was certainly some concern, and I'd be interested in hearing public input on this, about establishing precedent in this particular area, because there are many other streets in the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea that would be very similarly situated. With that, I'll turn it over to my fellow committee members for additional thoughts or comments on this particular item.
I guess I'll take a stab at it. One thing that concerns me is enforcement. If we were to make this a resident only parking, how would that be enforced? We could certainly implement some kind of a sticker system, but it would be tedious, especially when we have those events at Forest Theater. We recognize there's a lot of vehicles that are parking along there. We recognize the street is narrow. I'm concerned about enforcement as well as setting precedents, because if all narrow streets were for resident parking only, then that would really exacerbate the parking deficiency problem that we already have. And also, I'll open it up to the committee members, but we got 2 letters from the public that we could enter into the record as well. Did you want me to read those, Chief, or wait?
Yeah, actually, I have one comment from the public, and perhaps Brandon, if you want to comment a little bit on what the request is, the committee is reviewing, and then we open it up for the public. And I'll turn it over to you, Bob, to read those into the record. I have one comment from the public actually, I have 2 comments from the public on this one. Brandon, did you want to add any kind of opening comments as we move forward?
Thanks, Chief. I agree with everything that the other committee members have said. I would just want to add, I mean, I know that, a lot of our streets are narrow and, we run into this all the time, but I think it's important to note that the areas alongside the street are public right of way. And I think if you break down those words, it's public right of way. I mean, it's unfortunate that we have some of the things that make our village so charming from a character perspective are some of the things that make it difficult to live here sometimes. So that's just kind of where I'm at on this. I do feel pretty strongly this is, public right of way. And so I'll leave it at that, and then we'll hear from the public, and then we can come back and deliberate a little bit more.
Thank you so much. So with that, let's open this up for public comment, and I'll begin by reading a couple of items into the record. The first item is from Mr. Joe Tarantino. He writes that The area is close to Forest Theater, which needs all the close to parking it can get. Also, such a zone would trigger similar requests from other residential areas. Not a good idea. And that ends his comment. I did speak with a citizen this morning regarding the concerns in the area. And this particular citizen has lived there and expressed concern about it. And I apologize. I know her as Judge Wild. I don't remember her first name, but just to begin with, are you in attendance in this meeting, Judge Wild?
I just have the one shelf down there. I think I have others, but I'll have to go up into my storage room and poke around.
Okay, I will represent what she described to me on the phone. There was, she did express concern about a potential for visitors in the area and suggest that if there was a permit-only program established in the area, that extra guest passes or other kinds of mechanisms for residents to have people that aren't like full residents to park would be necessary. And she described that she has a helper that goes to the home 3 or 4 days a week, and that such a guest pass would be needed. Also, referring to a problem at the bottom of Santa Rita, as a vehicle would turn west on Mountain View. She explained that there's some obstruction of view and suggests, coupled with the consideration for residential parking, that we at some future point in time consider a no parking sign near that particular intersection because of the potential for a hazardous turning movement onto Mountain View from Santa Rita. And that concludes the public comment that I've received on that. Bob, you mentioned you've received 2 letters.
Oh, yes, Chief. Actually, you already read one into the record from Joe Tarantino. And actually, the second letter we got with attached photos was from Charlene White, who I see on the call today. So she's essentially referring to the photos and asking to speak at today's meeting. So if we're ready to open up to the public, maybe we could start with Ms. White.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll open to the public for comment on this particular item.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Michael, and my parents, Charlene and J. Arthur White, have asked me to advocate on their behalf. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlene and Arthur have lived in Carmel for close to 2 decades now. And for approximately 1.5 to 2 years, they have had nothing but problems from turning in on Ocean or any other access point to get to their home that's approximately almost on the middle of Santa Rita. Both of them are physically disabled. They're well into their 80s. And in Arthur's case, who's not here, he's in Africa right now, he's a physically disabled veteran, a person of color as well. And I mention that because in the 2 decades that they've lived here, approximately, they've never had any issues turning into Ocean, turning as narrow as it is here on Santa Rita, of being able to park any vehicle, whether it be their Prius or another car, to get a wheelchair out, to get a walker out, to get any of those things out. When they leave Redwood City, where they live a good chunk of the time, and come here to Carmel throughout the year, they ask themselves on a regular basis now, should we come down? Will we be able to get out of our cars? And I'd like to make a specific point on their behalf to say, this is really a one individual issue. There's a person who's renting across from them who has a total of 3 vehicles. 2 of them, perhaps you saw yesterday on your drive, are commercial industrial trucks. But I guess they're not commercial, but they're very large trucks. And anyway, The way that he parks them makes it, as I mentioned, a physical almost impossibility for them to park their cars on Needle side if you're bringing the car in from the front side or from the back side, even backing up. Oftentimes neighbors come out who are good neighbors to assist them.
And you can't turn right all the time. You can't turn
You
left
can't turn right, you
or
can't
left
turn left
when the vehicles are.
when the vehicles are there, which is
You have to
approximately
choose.
90% of the time. So anyway, our comments to the committee are thank you for your time and for all of your efforts. But in that, we'd also ask that you please, for their sake, they're in their 80s now, they're physically disabled, to get a walker out, to get any kind of wheelchair or accessibility for the disability within their own private driveway, as I mentioned, is an impossibility. And if you, for example, again, this is kind of it's hard to determine when this is all the time. Like if you drove by yesterday, within 10 seconds later or 10 minutes later, there were two other trucks. We even measured, you can't even get a fire truck by. So with that, we realized it's 3 minutes, and thank the committee for their time.
Thank you. Just for a point of clarification, how far, or how would you describe the parcel and in terms of distance from Ocean?
From Ocean,
Number 2 Santa Rita.
number 2 Santa Rita. So approximately on the left side, if you're looking out from their driveway, 3 houses, 2 houses to Ocean, and then 3 on the right-hand side, or actually 4.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to comment on that regarding this particulars about the trucks parking. I'll send some officers through there or parking people through there from time to time to see if we can identify the issue and maybe talk to the owner of the vehicle.
Thank you. Just for the record, the 2 pictures for the public to know, it shows the situation that we're describing, and it also shows the vehicle for their handicap accessibility.
Thank you.
So Chief, it looks like Lance has his hand up at the moment.
Great. Hello again. My husband and I bought a home on the corner of Ocean and Santa Rita, and we would come on the weekends. When we bought it, we were a bit concerned about the narrow streets, but we were on a corner, so we thought the access would be okay. Since the pandemic, we've shifted our primary residence from Woodside to Carmel. We're thrilled to be here full time, and now we're starting to see the full brunt of the issue at hand. Neighbors, we've spoken to almost every neighbor on the street, and they've all said they are concerned that as they age, if an emergency vehicle needed to come to their home, they couldn't get an ambulance. More recently, we're all concerned about fires. We're not quite that old, so we weren't thinking about it, but our worst fear came to pass yesterday when my mother, who's 89, fell on our driveway. We had to call 911. The entire street was impacted. The fire truck, the ambulance, and a police car blocked the corner. Had the truck or any tiny Mini Cooper be parked legally on our corner where there's a curb out, and it forces visitors to park half in the dirt and like a tire barely on the street. I'm waiting for one to roll down into the other neighbor's home. Or they just park right squarely on the street, curbside into the street. The emergency vehicles would have been impassable. I'm emotional now because she had to go to emergency room at Chuck. The fire chief was there, or fire engine was there, and the policeman who came by even said, we were saying, oh, this is now we see it visually. It isn't like with the tape measure measuring curb to our curb 9 feet, right, which is supposed to be 10 feet. The policeman said, oh yeah, this corner definitely should be no parking. I don't want to get the guy in trouble, but come out and pull a fire truck and see. Or come on garbage day when you watch the garbage men have to park on Ocean and drag all the trash cans up because a car is parked across the street, or watch them tag all our beautiful oak tree branches that come across. One giant one got broken down this winter. We also will see the garbage trucks reroute and go down and up through forests and figure out how the hell they're going to back up because there's no adequate street width. Now, I know it's a charming town. It's why we bought our second home here. It's why we love here. But at the same token, we need to coexist. It has to be functional. We live with animals but there is this balance here. It is imbalanced on the corner of Santa Rita and Ocean. And as you drive down the street, it's the same way. If someone is going to have a tenant, which I'm not opposed to it, or if you allow people to add ADU, make sure the owner has appropriate parking space. We all have a garage and we all have a driveway. If you need more, that tenant could rent a parking space and park all his multiple vehicles elsewhere. And to address what Joe Tarantino said, who clearly does not live on our block, ask him to call a fire truck when his mom has fallen and needs to get to the emergency room. This is not a temporary discussion. I don't give a shit of what happens on your other tiny streets. We own this home. I need access. We've called our lawyer to find out who is legally responsible when the ambulance cannot get to our house, or when our house is burning down and the fire truck can't come because we're letting a visitor park their cars in front of a access corner. That's my question. Is the city legally responsible? And then to Robert's concern, which is a fair one, we walk our dog daily, twice daily. There are a number of adjacent streets on our side of Ocean that have either no parking, full stop, or resident parking. So we are not the precedents for it. Other streets have. You've already made the exception because other neighbors who have similar concerns were granted their wishes. This is not a vanity thing. We don't want cars on our street. We want it to look pretty. We're talking about public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fung. Yvette, do we have any other items or members of the public? Oh, I see a hand waving. Yes.
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, Michelle. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, I didn't receive the notice of this meeting because our address, we just moved permanently to the area. And so it's my fault. I probably didn't update our current mailing address. So I did send an email to Mr. Swanson regarding our actual issues here at 3 Santa Rita. I happen to be directly opposite Charlene and Arthur's home. And our situation, I can corroborate with all the concerns that Charlene and Arthur have. I'm in a position where we have, our little driveway is not very big, and I cannot frequently find a safe way to maneuver away out of the driveway because there is typically a large white industrial truck parked in front of the house, blocking any view on my left side, and a blue car parked right in front of me, so that it takes several moves. And unfortunately, I'm not that quick, so that frequently there's a car coming on in my direction while I'm trying to get out. Frequently, I've had to move in order for the garbage trucks to get by. There's a tree, the branch doesn't have much of a chance to last much longer. It's clear that it's been hurt by any delivery truck that tries to come through. But it's funny, I wish we could have a meeting like this scheduled every week, because the last 2 days have been the most peaceful days on Santa Rita that I've ever witnessed. And I'm so grateful for you guys paying attention to this. And I agree that Carmel is uniquely beautiful and we need to protect everything that's special about it. And I think reasonable people can act reasonably, and it's just some people are not willing to accept that their actions are causing difficulties for others. And that's where I think with your assistance, if we can be consistently sending the right message that we have to be respectful of each other's safety issues, that we could probably resolve this. There are some places, I have to agree with Lance, that corner should be just at least there, no parking, because frequently when there's tons of traffic on Ocean, when I have to turn in on the left-hand street, there's somebody crossing the street, there's a car parked there, there's a dog, there's oncoming traffic. It's actually really hectic. And I would imagine for a lot of the elderly members of the community, making that turn is rather hair-raising. But anyway, I appreciate your time. That these are all very real concerns, and thank you for paying attention. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate that. And I'd just like to circle back, Mr. Fung. I'm very sorry about the recent medical emergency, and I hope your parents are doing well. So Yvette, do we have any additional public comments? I see Christine raising hand. Ms. Chin.
Go ahead. You'll just need to unmute.
Thank you.
Please remember to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Thank you. I'm aware of that time session. I'm here with my husband, Kurt Gracie, and thank you so much for this forum. We really appreciate it. We own a home on Santa Rita 5 southeast of Ocean. And our concern, I appreciate that photo that was shown earlier during this meeting, but that is not a typical photo of what this street looks like. We live next door to a fellow that has a tenant, and his tenant is a contractor by trade. And so he has his big contractor's truck there. And he also has his buddies that come. And so they're sawing wood, they're always hammering, doing something on a daily basis. And I did check with the city, and there is not an active permit for any work to be done in that property. So I don't know. I did walk over to the city, and I was told that an code enforcement officer was going to speak to me about what was going on next door. We also have issues with some of the work that they've done. There's water now coming to our house. Again, our home is located at on Santa Rita 5 southeast of Ocean. There is, we've lived there for over 34 years. And so we're not a new resident. We are very aware that many streets along on Taurus and other streets also have resident parking. And I was kind of put off a little bit by some of the comments saying that you can't enforce these things. Well, how do you enforce those streets? How do you pick and choose which street, which block gets a resident parking only designation? You can hear now with these public comments, we are frustrated, we are concerned, just like Lance and Charlene. It's a struggle to find parking even in front of our house, or we have a very narrow driveway. We are very, Kurt owns a restaurant in town. I work in town. We love this town, and we want to support it in any way, every way possible. But as you can hear, we have a real problem with people every day working, sawing wood, and it's a mess. It's a mess. So I'm sure if you came and drove down there today, you will see that tree battered. You will see that on Mondays, these pickup trucks are honking their horn, knocking on the doors. Can you help us? Can you move these vehicles? Well, they're not our vehicles. I can tell you, we need some help. And I don't know what the solution is. You folks are much smarter than we are as far as finding a solution. But as you can see, we are crying out for some help from the city. And I do hope certainly that our voices are heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate the comments. Yvette, do we have other public input for this item?
I don't see anybody else's hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll bring it back to the committee for any comments or discussion.
If you don't mind, Bob, are you okay if I start?
Sure, go right ahead.
I just want to start first of all by saying, Mr. Fung, I hope your mom is okay. Thanks for sharing that with us. It's, this is compelling information that's helpful for us. And then secondary to that, thank everyone else that participated. I mean, for me, this is what the public process and local government is all about, is being face to face with people, even though we're on Zoom. But getting to talk to folks and hear your issues. So thank you everybody for participating. I definitely took some notes there, and I have some thoughts, not to make a motion at this point, but just to get my thoughts out there. So I'm wondering, as we drove through there, one of the things I was thinking is that, we do have rules and regulations with respect to how much of the street you have to leave open when you park there. Chief has offered to have his staff go by there more often. I'm excited, or not excited. I'll commit my staff, my code enforcement team too, to go by there on a regular basis, make it part of his loop. So we can just make sure that, there is room to get by. So that's one. The secondary to that, though, as we were driving by, I was thinking, I still feel pretty strongly about public right of way. And I understand from the public works staff that those resident only areas were designated some time ago. I don't know if that's something that's been designated recently, and their team can confirm that one way or the other. But with my feeling about public right of way, I do think, though, that we need to take a look at parts of that street where it might be appropriate to put no parking posts, our classic Carmel no parking posts, so that you can only park on one side of the street, whether you're a member of the public or not. Just there shouldn't be cars parked. If the street is so narrow that you can't park a car on either side, one side should say no parking. And I think that might help a little bit. So I'd like to talk about that when we start working on our motion. Let's see. What else did I have on here? The resident only parking, if we did go that route, I'm not sure that would actually solve the issue with the big white truck, because technically they're a resident too. I mean, I know they're a renter, but they have just as much right to park on that street as anyone else lives in that area. So that's not really going to solve the issue that you have. I think that we as the Traffic Safety Committee should focus more on how we make that street parkable. How do we create areas on that street where you just can't park and potentially impact someone else. So I think those are my comments for now. I might have some more later, but Bob, I'll turn it over to you for your thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Yeah, I share many of the same comments that Brandon had. Kind of going back to the public comments. These are all very legitimate concerns. Very real, and the purpose of the Traffic Safety Committee, number one, is public safety. So this is absolutely the appropriate forum to talk about these issues and try to come up with a solution. In my mind, though, I don't see anything that's a quick and easy fix that's going to be 100% fail-proof. So we have a collective a challenge here. A couple of things that we could consider. One would be resident-only parking. That would help. That might help. I don't know if that's going to solve the whole problem, because when the Forest Theater has events, people are going to park where they park anyway. That's not going to deter them. And I don't know if we have the resources to have police out there all day long checking on stickers and who has a legitimate right to park there or not. So maybe it's something that we could consider and try and check and do it for a year and see if that makes a difference. Another option that Brandon suggested is no parking posts or making parking only on one side. We haven't done a count on a number of residents and vehicles, but if we restrict parking to one side, I don't think the residents alone would have enough parking spaces. So that would impact even the residents there on there's a comment in the chat that's not part of the public record, but some residents have more than one vehicle, more than two vehicles at times. So there's plenty of there's a lot of vehicles there right now, and having parking on one side of the street, it would be helpful in terms of being able to get the garbage truck to pass through there. But where's the overflow vehicles going to go from just the residents alone, let alone people looking for parking spaces from Forest Theater? So that's kind of a problem. There was a couple of comments. One was about potentially unpermitted work that I'm sure Brandon's code enforcement officer could investigate that. There was an issue about a tree branch that certainly, thanks for bringing it to our attention. Public Works and Forestry will go out there and address the tree branch. So some of these little things, or no parking in the corner at Ocean Avenue, these are things that could be considered that are low-hanging fruit, so to speak. But I'm frustrated as the residents are, and that there's no easy solution here. That street was narrow from day one. There's a lot of trees on that street. It's a beautiful street, but it's a problem. It's not the only place in the city that we have such a problem, but it certainly is a problem. And that's my comments for now. I'm not ready to have a motion.
Thank you, Bob. I would just like to add a couple of comments, and I hope that we can end up framing a motion, or I might be able to help with this as we move forward. But I see this as perhaps something that we can take a incremental approach to. And for me, the most important issue is the life safety issue of getting an ambulance or a fire engine on that street or through that street. I see that priority, the potential solution for those priorities that are being that I'm describing and that have been brought to our attention by the public today as something that we might be able to address incrementally near ocean with some no parking signs where a particular roadway narrows with a couple of the no parking posts that Brandon described. And perhaps, we can start with that incremental approach. And if the problem persists, I see the residential only as sort of a big hammer method, or the no parking on one entire side of the street as a big hammer method, as opposed to maybe we can pull out the particular spots. And I think it would be within the committee's purview to make a decision on a couple of small areas there for installation of no parking signs that would although it's not specific to the item that we're describing here or was requested, I think because of the life safety concerns, your city staff could solve those problems if we could come to unanimous agreement on that. If myself, Bob, and Brandon go out there and walk and identify specific locations that might be benefit from some no parking posts. So with that, I'll any thoughts on that, Bob or Brandon, or
Yeah, I could
frame a motion around?
I could take a swing at a motion.
Okay.
See how we do here. So I would move one, to not make this a resident only parking zone at this point. Two, to have the chief, myself, and Director Herreri physically walk, the three of us walk the entire street and note areas where no parking posts would be helpful to prevent these issues from happening in the future, where you've got two cars parked on either side. And three, to return to this committee at the next meeting. This isn't a regularly scheduled committee. We do it when we have items requested and they sort of pile up to a number that is efficient. So I'm not going to put a time frame on that, but I would say come back to the next traffic safety committee with the report on how that's working. And so that would be my motion. And before there's a second on that, I want to encourage the folks that came and participated today. If we do that, we put up these posts between now and the next traffic safety committee, feel free to reach out to us and let us know how it's going. You're the eyes and ears on the ground. You live there. You're going to see it a lot more than we will. So please be a part of that solution. But that would be my motion, those three items.
I like to second the motion, and with the discussion that's a very good logical first step. And I would imagine it would help. It might not solve the whole problem, but it certainly would help on those crunch points where we have the street next down. We have the no parking in strategic locations. It could only help. And then we, the motion is to come back with the traffic safety committee at the next meeting and see, okay, is that sufficient to solve the problem? I would suspect not. But then from there, we can decide what additional remedies we have based on the results of that first step. So the motion.
All right. So the motion's been made. Thank you so much. And it's been seconded. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. That's unanimous, and I appreciate the public's input. It's hopefully this first incremental series of steps helps with the most serious issues regarding life safety.
Right. Good.
So with that, item D on our new business regards a citizen request to address safety issues for pedestrian walking on Ocean Avenue pathways and a consideration for white and green no parking posts near Ocean on side streets, particularly San Antonio, Carmelo, Camino Real, Casanova, and Monteverde. And this is an issue that is, it's a safety issue when cars park in the area between Ocean and the pedestrian pathway. Visibility of the pedestrians by motorists and is adversely affected or impacted. Likewise, pedestrian ability to see approaching vehicles is also impacted. So with that, are there any staff comments or I guess additional descriptions that are needed?
Not for me, Chief. I think you described it well. I think I'm excited to hear if there's any public comment on this one.
Okay. Bob?
No additional comments. I'm surprised that this issue came up now, whereas the issue has been there for a long time. One thing based on our tour yesterday, I would be an advocate of making the intersections more consistent, because those 4 or 5 intersections, each one's a little different. So if we had a consistent practice of no parking signs or putting boulders to block parking or to put crosswalks, if we could be consistent, I think that would be a step in the right direction. But I'm not convinced that there's such a problem out there right now that hasn't been there for a long time.
And again, from our staff review of this item, we did notice that there are several corners in amongst the variety of corners between that in that area that do have some no parking posts and others that don't. There are, as Mr. Harari describes, inconsistencies. The closest to the beach parking, there are crosswalks. Further up, there are no crosswalks depicted for those walkways. So with that, I think we can open it up for public comment. I'll start by reading Mr. Joe Tarantino wrote, "I am not aware of safety issues for pedestrians walking on those pathways. Have done it 1,000 times without incident."
Chief, I don't see anyone else's hand raised at this time.
Okay.
Public comment.
All right. Thank you, Yvette. With that, I guess just for staff discussion, I think as written, we were just considering the parking posts at a few of these locations that don't have parking posts that might pose parking problems and safety problems. I have seen that right there is a great photograph to describe or show the problem. And Rob, was that's just on Google Earth. So obviously the Google people caught one at the point in time where it actually is going on, and it actually depicts this situation very well with that white Prius blocking the view. A car turning onto that side street would have their views, create a situation where a pedestrian could be popping out, so to speak, from between cars and cause a little bit of a view corridor problem. So thanks for finding that on Google Earth.
Yeah, see, this was in April of 2021.
Yeah. And with COVID impacts and less tourism, it probably hasn't been a serious issue, but with reopening and additional people, particularly on some of the side streets down by the beaches, when the beach parking fills up, people start looking for parking anywhere. And that's a good example. And that's what was brought to our attention by a citizen who wrote and described the issue. But like the other issue we had previously, it seems like there would be a good opportunity here for a multi-prong approach where we look at each intersection and try to get all of these intersections a little more consistent with the addition of a crosswalk on the pathway, and then some added no parking signs in places where it looks like it would be an attractive nuisance, so to speak, where a car could actually park and cause that visibility problem. Bob or Brandon, would you like to add any thoughts?
I would agree. I think the comment yesterday about putting boulders where we can, if a boulder will work, I would like to not have so many no parking signs, but I think we have plenty across the city. But I think boulders would be a great deterrent. And that would be a good first step, is to reduce parking in those corners and make it a little more consistent. Another option is to do the crosswalks, which is also a fairly easy solution, but perhaps that could be phase 2.
Well, I mean, on the boulder situation, I think I'm okay in principle with the boulders, because they're, we have boulders up and down the road there. I would just want to make sure that the boulders are large enough that people would actually see them. When we say so like so yeah, if you pause there for a second, that's great. So like I would say, towards the left-hand side is like the second from the left. That's a pretty good one. It's high enough, people are going to see that. The one directly to the right of that, like the really low flat one, that's not going to do anything, and people are probably going to accidentally bash their car into that and probably would have an argument that like they couldn't see that. So if we're going to do that, let's just make if you make that into a motion, Bob, I'd like that to be part of the motion, that they're at least like 2 feet tall or something like that. As for the crosswalks, I think that should be part of phase 1. I mean, outside of this conversation about the parking being unsafe, I think it's just a good idea. I mean, I'm seeing this person walk across the sidewalk there, walk across the pathway there. I think it's just a good safety measure. I mean, it's a thing that people's eyeballs when they're driving are trained to look for. A crosswalk. There's a crosswalk down at the last intersection. We noticed that yesterday, and it's not obtrusive. I think it's really helpful. So I would ask, maybe we can make that part of phase 1. It's just crosswalking all of those intersections up and down both sides of Ocean on the side streets. Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Another option we have is to try, we do this a lot in Carmel. We try it in one location, and if it's successful, then continue at the others. We could pick one of these intersections, do the crosswalks, do the boulders, and there are no parking signs as it fits on that location. Give it a run, give it 6 months, see if we have positive feedback. And then if it seems to be working well, then we could do it, just mass produce it on the other 4 or 5 intersections. So it's another option. We don't necessarily have to do all intersections on day 1. Food for thought.
One concept on that in terms of the incremental approach is, it seems likely that the biggest issues are the ones closest to the beach.
Right.
And so if you were to start, or if we were able to craft a motion that works on an incremental approach like that, maybe we start on the areas nearest the beach and work our way up the hill.
I would offer that 6 months between the first one and the second one is probably too long. I'd be supportive of like every month, because we'll know. I mean, one of the wonderful things about working here is that we have such an active group of residents. They're going to let us know within the first week whether they like it or not. So if that's what you're looking for, is some feedback of positivity, I think a month is sufficient to get that feedback. So I would say 1 a month would be better.
Okay. So I'll take a swing at it, as Brandon would say. So I think I make a motion that we each month, starting from the west and going east, that we upgrade each intersection with the with the crosswalks on the pedestrian paths, and tall boulders and or no parking signs, as the case may be. Start at the one intersection, wait a week or so, notice it in the Friday letter, for example, listen for feedback, and if the feedback's positive or no feedback, then we go continue the process up the street towards Monte Verbi.
Bob, I'll second that. If you can add to your motion, please, that the boulder has to be no shorter than 2 feet tall.
Well, of course, the boulder has to be at least 2 feet tall.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, I'll second that.
Did you get that, Yvette? That's a hell of a motion. Okay.
Thank you so much for the motion and the second. With that, let's call a vote. Signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
I,
Aye also, that's passed unanimously. That moves us on to new business item number E, or letter E, staff discussion regarding the conversion of two-way stops to four-way stops in residential grid areas. And with that, would Bob or Brandon, would either of you like to kind of open with what it is we're talking about here?
I suppose I'll start. This has been an issue that the Traffic Safety Commission has been, or committee, I should say, not a commission. Committee has been looked at quite a few times over the past 4 or 5 years that I've been here. The intent of the grid, especially south of Ocean, was to have 2 blocks before you stop. The speed limit on all the streets, I believe all is 25 miles an hour, with a couple of exceptions to 15, Rob?
That's correct, yes.
Right. Speeding is perceived by some, but every time we do traffic counts out there, just like on San Carlos, traffic count, traffic speed is 17 miles an hour or 18 miles an hour, something like that. So there's not really a significant speeding problem. We do have accident. The police does have accident data. There's not a lot of accidents at these intersections. When we install stop signs, in addition to just the cost of the stop sign and the maintenance of them, it's more work when we have a lot of trees that that block these block the stop signs. So we have to keep the trees pruned, and while we don't mind doing that, it's more work, more effort, and there's not a lot of, in my opinion, there's not a lot of benefit to having more stop signs. If anything, there's more stops and more noise, but brake noise and that type of thing, and less efficient traffic flow. So I have been historically opposed to installing additional stop signs unless there's demonstrated speeding, which I haven't seen, or accidents, which has happened, and there has been a couple of stop signs put in because of specific accidents. But as a general discussion topic, I would oppose that.
Thank you. Just to add to one comment regarding addition of stop signs, it's not within the ability of the Traffic Safety Committee to make decisions on stop signs. If the stop signs needed to be added, that would ultimately need to go before City Council and ultimately need the entire City Council to vote and approve such an item. Brandon, did you have any other thoughts on comments on two-way versus four-way stops in residential grid?
Yeah, not much. Thanks for the note on the stop signs going to City Council. It's a majority vote. I know you probably, that's probably what you meant. You said the whole City Council, but it would just be a majority vote of the council.
Right.
But yeah, the council would have to consider it. Yeah, I tend to agree with where Bob was going. I think that having a broad brush of let's make a policy of changing them all to four-way or two-way. I don't think that fits. I mean, there's a recurring theme every time we talk about one of the items on the Traffic Safety Committee, and that's that we have a unique village, which we love. I mean, we cherish that. And so typically broad brush policy conversations like this are kind of non-starters for me. There's very few things I'll ever be comfortable saying we're going to do this everywhere in Carmel-by-the-Sea exactly the same, because that's just not how we do things, nor should we. So I'm comfortable taking them as they come in the future, one by one, but as a bigger policy discussion of doing some broad brush decision, I'm not in favor of that either.
And Chief, we did get a written comment from Mr. Tarantino that probably should be read into the record as well.
Of course, yeah. So now we can move forward from staff and just ask for public input. And I will read Mr. Tarantino's comment into the record. He comments, conversion of two-way to four-way stops is smart, but only in those intersections with limited left-right visibility at the now two-stop intersection and or that are most trafficked. So that comment. Yvette, are there other public comments that should be taken at this point?
If you'd like to comment on this item, go ahead and raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you so much. With that, it sounded to me like, Brandon, you were pretty close to a motion in your description. Bob did the last one. Do you want to take a stab at this?
Sure, I would move that, let me look at the actual agenda topic so I get something that's close to what we're actually talking about here. Hold on, sorry. Apologies. Give me 1 second. Okay. So my motion would be that at this point to take no action regarding conversion of two-way stops to four-way stops in the residential grid area, and continue to take those matters on a case-by-case basis and evaluate each one on its own merits.
I would second that.
Thank you for the motion and the second. All those in favor or opposed, please signify by the appropriate sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion's unanimous, and that brings us to the last item on our agenda for new business. Consideration of a stop sign or other device for southbound Junipero Avenue at the intersection of 7th Avenue.
I'll get this started. As we noticed yesterday, that's perfect. That's 7th Avenue looking east at the stop sign. We don't seem to have a problem with people stopping at the stop sign, and that's right where the pedestrian or the sidewalk crossing is. That part's fine. The issue appears to be when the car juts out a little bit further beyond the stop sign, and there's a car, if you would, Rob, to the left. When there's buses in those long bus parking areas, when they're blocking the view, the car that comes out cannot see the southbound Junipero southbound vehicle until it's potentially too late. We know of a few close calls on the, I'll leave it to the chief to kind of elaborate on that. There's not been any significant accidents, but there's been a couple of close calls in the past year. One thing I would say is that if we were to make this a three-way stop, so it would be we'd add a stop sign for southbound Junipero, northbound Junipero, and keep the 7th stop sign as is. What we do have is along Junipero, we have stop signs, three-way stops or four-way stops on 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Avenues. This is the only one in a long stretch that doesn't have stops on Junipero. And perhaps this is the time to strongly consider it. Of course, we would have to, if the committee agrees, we would have to take this to the city council for approval. And we know there's pros and cons to adding stop intersections with stop signs at any time. But perhaps this is a case that's truly warranted because of the views that are blocked by the buses. Unlike trees, we can't trim branches when there's a big bus in the way. So I'm not ready to make a motion, but that's what the situation is in my mind. And maybe it's time to upgrade it to a full stop.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Brandon, would you like to make any comments before we open it up to the public?
No, I think Bob captured it well, so I'll save my thoughts until after the public comment.
Thank you. I'd like to add a couple of points. I did a review of accident data at this particular location. No accidents in all of 2021, no accidents in all of 2020. Reaching back to 2019, we found one accident that was related to the intersection, and it wasn't necessarily a southbound vehicle on Junipero intersecting or colliding with a eastbound vehicle from 7th Street. in this particular case, it was a 7th Street vehicle departing to the north and turning left onto Junipero, striking a vehicle that was northbound on the other side of the road that's depicted as you can see here. So with that, it doesn't seem to be so much of an issue that would be supported by a high number of accidents. However, as Mr. Harari described, there have been reported close calls at this location. I would submit to you that the speeds, given the width of the roadway and the sort of wide open nature, particularly on southbound vehicles, that vehicles would be moving fairly quickly through there, and that with the obstruction of view, that could be a serious accident if one were to happen. The other thing that I think is certainly worth considering as it relates to this particular intersection is, just as Mr. Harari described, there are many intersections that are even less traveled than 7th and Junipero that do have stop signs that affect Junipero traffic. That said, I think there's a consistency argument that could be made. This particular intersection is fairly complex in that, it's a split roadway, and if you Rob, travel down to 8th Street, we can see what a stop sign might look like at that intersection by just going one block over. And I think you can see from this example that, stop signs on both sides of the intersection, or both sides, one in the center medium and then on the right-hand side with markings on the street. Something like that for 7th wouldn't be bad or inconsistent at all with what's happening elsewhere in Carmel. And similarly, that would affect the northbound traffic as well. So with that, let's open it up to the public and see if there's any comments or thoughts on this particular item. We have one member of the public who has hung in with us. Yvette, are there?
I don't see.
I don't want to say hands raised. Has
Yeah.
that hand been raised?
I'm not sure if the member of the public that has the phone number that begins with 685 wants to comment on this item. Okay.
Seeing that no hand raised or no phone unmuting, well, let's just move back to the committee. What's your tolerance for continuing discussion or a motion?
So I kind of held my thoughts until just to make sure there's no public comment, but I personally think there's a need here for this. This is why I come into work this way every day. That's, I go down and I usually turn on 7th and I come out that way too. And I myself have been involved in a couple of close calls. Not obviously I'm a great driver, so it wasn't my fault, but there have been some close calls. And I think that from a consistency perspective, it makes total sense. You've got it on either side. You've got the Ocean intersection right after that. There's another one just up from that. Down on 8th, there's a 4-way stop. That Junipero Road is kind of like one of the highways through town. So it makes sense to have that there. One thing I'd be curious about, and I will defer to my much smarter traffic counterparts on this, Bob and Rob. Do you guys think there's a possibility if we got rid of one of those bus spots? One, do all the bus spots get used, do we need all those? And then 2, if we got rid of one, would there be a possibility of recreating that right turn lane like we have down on 8th to go down 7th?
I've seen summers where there's every bus stall is occupied.
Okay.
Rob, do you agree, or what's your experience?
Yeah, they are all occupied during the summer and tourist seasons.
It's
Okay.
also a revenue source. They pay a bare bones fee for the privilege of parking in those parking stalls.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the revenue. Just I want to make sure if there's a need, because I don't want those buses going anywhere else. I don't want them to get cute and try to park somewhere else. If there's a need for the parking spots, let's not get rid of one. But thank you for that answer. Then I wouldn't pursue creating a right turn lane. But I do still think that there's a need for a stop sign, a three-way stop sign at that location.
In the event that it eventually lands in the form of a motion, would Brandon or Bob, who would actually craft a sketch of what it might look like in terms of a consideration?
Typically, the Public Works has brought these issues to the city council. A sketch would be a good idea. We'd probably want to, in addition to the stop signs, put stop ahead legends on the pavement, especially at first, and notify the public that this is out there with a press release of some sort. But Public Works would take on that role.
Okay.
I imagine you'd probably even go so far, like for the first month or something, put out some like sandwich boards with new stop sign ahead or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good idea.
But the first step would be, I mean, if we do agree that we want to go down this route, then you guys, Public Works, you guys need to take an item to the city council, right?
Sure, Brad.
Yes. I don't know how to write a staff report for a stop sign, Bob. Sorry, you'll have to do it.
We've done it before.
I know.
All right.
So we're ready to make a motion?
Yeah, I did the
I
last
am.
one. You go, Bob.
My turn. I make a motion that the committee, well, let's see. I make a motion that Public Works takes this issue, this intersection issue, to the city council meeting, an upcoming council meeting, with the recommendation from the committee that we include stop signs for southbound and northbound Junipero, and with appropriate perhaps stop ahead signs and their stop ahead legends or whatnot. And I think that's it for a motion.
It's good for me. I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous, and that concludes our new business for the day, and we move directly to adjournment. Thank you so much for your attendance.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you. See you guys soon.